Ross McGregor. I'm the artistic director of Arrows and Traps Theatre, the associate company running out of the Jack Studio, London. During this difficult time for theatres, all theatres being shut due to lockdown and the coronavirus, we are fundraising, as I'm sure lots of theatre companies are right now, and venues, to protect our survival and future projects. Since we can't physically make any theatre, we thought we would look back on the previous work that we've done. We've done 19 shows, and I thought it would be fun to sort of choose a few of them and look back over it, see what worked, see what we enjoyed about the processes, contact the cast and crew for each one. It's really just an opportunity to come together as a company again. I mean, we haven't really seen each other since March, so it's as much for our benefit as it is yours, but I thought it might be fun. And this is part 3. You can find the links to the previous videos down below, and we're going to be looking at tarot. With part 3 of this video, it's a little different because we are going to be showing the full filmed performance of tarot on YouTube for free. You can watch it if you just, again, click the link below, and you can see the whole thing. It's about an hour and 40 minutes. There isn't an interval. You can create one by pressing pause, probably about after an hour.
Hi, my name is Connie, and I played Goethe Perilla in Taro.
Hi there, my name's Tom Hartill, and I played Andre Friedman / Robert Capa in the Arrows and Traps production of Tarot.
My name is Lucy Uanu, and I played Gerda Tarot.
My name is Laure Marks, and I played Ruth Surf in Tarot.
Hello, I'm Matthew Parker, and I was the movement director on Tarot.
Hi, my name's Alex Stevens, and I played David Seymour, or Shim for short.
My name is Sam Victory, and I played Maria Eisner, amongst several others. I think I had like 7 different characters in Tarot total.
I'm Beatrice, and I played Greta Garbo in Tarot.
Hi. I'm Toby Wynne-Davis, and in Taro I played the role of Goethe's father, Heinrich Porriel.
Gerda Tarot, a given name Goethe Perilla, was a Jewish-German photographer who lived in the first half of the 20th century. When the Nazis came to power, she was already a young woman, and her family fled the country to get away from them. And they separated. Her brothers went to England, she went to Paris, and her parents went to Palestine, and they never saw each other again. In Paris, as a refugee, she met Andre Friedman, who would later become Robert Capa, a name she actually came up with. Friedman was a struggling photographer, and they fell in love, and he taught her everything he knew about photography, and she found that it was something she excelled at. She had a natural talent for, a natural vision.
The core, it is a love story, but it is also a story about finding your identity and coming to terms with your heritage and your culture, and at the same time finding your own expression of your personality through art.
But being that she was Jewish, a refugee, and a woman, the opportunities for her were really limited. So she ended up passing off a lot of her work as Capa's, and Robert Capa would become the far more famous individual in the 20th century. But now we know that a lot of his early work was actually hers.
And they also go to Spain to document the civil war there under Franco. And unfortunately, tragically, Gerda Tarot dies in Spain.
And she's widely acknowledged now as the first female photojournalist to be killed whilst covering a war on the front lines.
To say that Gerda Tarot was a brave and determined woman is a huge understatement at best. She was headstrong, she was passionate, She was fiery. She is someone who should be a role model for many people. But most of all, she changed the way that people viewed war. Her work showed that war was not glamorous, like all the propaganda was telling people. Her work showed beauty through horror. And she was a truly skilled photographer and an incredible woman.
In terms of who she was and where she came from, she sort of was coming from a backdrop where anti-Semitism was very much on the rise in Germany, and sort of Jewish people were being more and more persecuted under the shadow of what was to come. And that was one of the reasons for her name change, and indeed Kappa's name change as well. And there's still an element of that around today. In 2016, one of her exhibitions that had been put in place as a permanent fixture in Germany was then defaced by what was believed to be an anti-Semitic group. So there is still a sort of notion of that feeling and of that fear around what she did, and to sort of escape that was very much a part of the story we were telling. As it went forward, we also explored her life in Spain and covering the Spanish Civil War as a war photographer, which was largely about highlighting a conflict that had gone unknown or unacknowledged by the rest of the world. And what she sought to do was to tell the story of the people in that conflict, which might seem like quite a small thing from the outside, but she really wanted to tell the story of those people, about who they were and where they came from and what they were really fighting for, and draw attention to that, which in itself is an inherently noble purpose. But she was able to do it with such a humanity and popularity that it was really something quite special.
When I approached the writing of Tarot, I knew I wanted to start sort of at the end and work backwards as a sort of a flashback. I needed a device with which to tell this. It's kind of commonly known about Gerda that she adored the film star Greta Garbo, and I thought that might be a nice device that in her final hours she imagines a conversation with her idol, where they go over the ups and downs of her past and try to restage it, refilm it, create a film of her life as Garbo might have been cast in had their timelines coincided. When approaching the casting of Garbo, really, I mean, you're talking about someone incredibly iconic, and in terms of towering stage presence and a sense of regal grace, there's only one person really in the company that you can go to, and that's Beatrice.
That was pretty daunting, since she's such an absolute icon. And of course, Garbo, as she appears in Tarot, is not the real person Greta Garbo, but a figment of Gerda's imagination. So she is very cool, she's very confident, she's very witty, just like the characters that she was famous for playing on screen. I think that my Garbo in particular owed a lot to Matahari and to Ninotchka, which are two of my favourite films of hers. So it was enormously challenging, but also probably the most fun I've ever had playing a character on stage.
I think what's so interesting about Tarot, I mean, first off, it's a beautiful personal story of strength and determination overcoming incredible odds. The bravery she showed. She was driven from her home, separated from her family by the fascists, and she chose to fight fascism wherever she found it, which in the end she lost her life for it. But beyond the personal, I think her story addresses so many of the issues that we've struggled with as a society since then. The prejudice she faced, both as a woman, having to pass off her work as Kappa's for it to be recognised before she could gain the credibility to work for herself, despite the fact that her talent should have spoken for itself. Then there was the prejudice she faced being Jewish, which is something she shared with Kappa, Andre Friedman, which is why they both had to change their names. And then the fact she was a refugee. She arrived in this new country with basically no more than she could carry. And what she achieved from that, what she accomplished, what she gave back, was incredible.
So I think the fact that we were telling a story about somebody who history had to a large degree sort of forgotten was important in itself, because it was almost like we were discovering something new whilst we were doing it, and uncovering the humanity behind that story and the relationship between Kappa and TARO, which told us a lot about who they were as people, and that they were flawed, sort of what they were trying to do and the importance of that.
Gerda Taro was a truly inspirational figure. She refused to ever be small or insignificant, no matter how many people told her she was, or how loudly they said it. She died far too young, as the bravest and most selfless people always seem to, and the world lost out on everything she could have given us after that. But in her short life, she gave us all an example of how to deal with adversity, how to live without fear or compromise. And amidst it all, of course, Taro is a love story. The whirlwind romance that she shared with Robert Kappa that I don't think either of them expected or ever got over. Certainly Robert Kappa never got over her death.
I think Taro is probably one of my favourite shows, mainly, two reasons. One is it's one of the best stories I've heard in recent years, a real test of personal achievement and bravery under fire. She was an incredible person, but also I love the show because of the staging, the stripped back feel to it, the simplicity of the set, but then the absolute complexity of the movement, the ensemble, the blocking, the mime, the fact that people had to play 110 parts each. You get moments as a director, founder, writer, head of a family, a theatre family, and for me, Taro was one of the moments when you get to see exactly what you had in your head maybe 2 months previously on stage, and that really is one of my favourite things, and it makes me incredibly sad and heartbroken that we're not there doing that now. And it's tough.
Well, as those of you who follow the company will no doubt know, one of the key characteristics of an Arrows and Traps show is our use of musically accompanied movement sequences, whether that be to advance the narrative or perhaps more abstractly to present an emotional theme at a particular moment, or even to illustrate a socio-political context or background to the story. And of course in Taro we do all of these, from Goethe's arrival in Paris, with its heady nights in smoke-filled bars and early run-ins with the local fascists, to her time at the front line in the Spanish Civil War, photographing soldiers and the fleeing refugees, and quite literally getting caught in the crossfire.
Taro was performed in thrust on 3 sides, and we had very, very minimal set and props. There were no props except a camera. The set was a table, 2 chairs and a bench. Our costumes were these grey jumpsuits, and we'd pick up a certain hat or scarf or glasses or coat that defined a character.
So for instance, Heinrich, who was Gerda's father, would wear a brown trilby hat every time he was in a scene. So Toby would put the hat on, his physicality would change. He would become Heinrich. And then when Heinrich needed to leave, he would take the hat off and he was gone.
Because it's so stripped back and open, you can't hide behind anything. You can't hide behind lavish sets or costumes, which is amazing because it really, really puts all the focus on these characters and the story.
No props was a great opportunity as well. It allowed for miming, which had challenges in itself, but it was great fun because it allowed you to have things on stage that you might not necessarily be able to have anyway. So for instance, we had a parrot, Captain Flint, who was a roommate of Gerda's, and some of the actors actually got to embody the parrot as well.
Let into our soul, invade us. I still can't look at peanuts in the same light.
When I founded the company in 2014, I always wanted to make a rep theatre company, something that's been close to my heart, mainly because of the absence of them in the UK. I wanted to make something where a core group of actors worked as a team, drew up a shorthand, learned to bypass that uncomfortable rehearsal room where nobody knows each other, it's the first day of school kind of vibe, and I thought there'd be an immense fun for the actors, especially that if you had continued castings, that you could break out of that trope of I play, you know, a certain kind of role, and over the course of a year play a varied spectrum of parts. So I thought that was interesting, and eventually I knew I had to try to actually stage things in rep at the same time. So our choices, we did a couple of Shakespeares in 2016, I think, and then this is the second attempt, and it was TARO in rep with Gentleman Jack. They're both true stories about real people, and although the content isn't the same and the staging really isn't the same, they had a similar idea, this sense of finding yourself, or finding a voice, finding out who you want to be, and probably what you want to say when you know who you want to be.
I think what I really enjoyed about performing TARO and Gentleman Jack in rep, I mean, there were lots of things. Obviously, it's great to just even perform anything in rep, to work on two productions, but I was very lucky to play two very interesting characters based on real people. So I played Anne Lister, or the older version of Anne Lister, in Gentleman Jack, and then played Goethe Perilla in TARO.
I really enjoyed the change of pace, because obviously TARO was like an immensely physical show, and I had at least like 7 different characters and various, obviously not costume changes because it was just an item, but there was a lot to focus on, and there wasn't any real sort of arc with any individual character because it was a lot of little snippets, which was great. It was so much fun to kind of embody all these different people, but obviously with Gentleman Jack it was one person whole way through, and it was really enjoyable to kind of follow the journey from beginning all the way to end with this one person, see how that affected them.
The focus from an actor's point of view was much more on each scene, and you had time in between scenes where you were off stage, and in contrast to that, TARO was basically one long scene, and we were all on stage throughout the whole of it and were the ensemble, and then became a character, and some people playing lots of different characters as well. So, and there were lots of theatrical devices supporting this kind of storytelling. So using physical theatre, we moved the set around, and
so yeah, just the different ways of working. Obviously, you know, Gentleman Jack very naturalistic, one character, TARO like way out there. So that was really fun.
Yeah, and what was exciting about that is that because we were on stage the whole time and it was staged in this way, you didn't have that moment off stage where you're getting ready for the next thing, or you're thinking ahead, and you just, in TARO, it was like a roller coaster ride. You know, we started it off all together on stage and, you know, off we went. And it made the experience very immediate, and you really had to be in every moment and just react and respond. So it was a real pleasure to perform it, because it felt very intense, immediate, in the moment, and exciting. You know, a bit of set was moved around, and whoosh, you were in another scene, and you know, you were like, oh yes, we're doing this right now. And so yeah, I remember always thinking it was really strange when you realized that it was over, because you were so in the world and in the character, and that was a very different experience, and it was nice to have that as a contrast to the more traditional Gentleman Jack. And even though the styles were so different, the stories had similar themes in them. So they were both about identity and finding yourself, discovering yourself in some way.
I think my favourite part of rehearsing for TARO was figuring out the language that Garbo uses to interact with the rest of the ensemble. Obviously there are two kind of strands of narrative going on in that play. There's the main narrative of how Goethe Perila becomes Gerda Taro, but there's also the meta-narrative of Garbo and Gerda creating the film of Gerda's life. And Garbo kind of puts herself in the role of the director for that. And so it was a lot of fun to come up with little moments with the rest of the cast of, oh, if I touch you here, then that kind of propels you forward into the scene, or oh, I'll bring you your hat that you wear for this character and take the old one away so you can make that character change.
But I think the joy of working on an ensemble show is that, one, you're never bored. You know, you're always doing something, whether you're an integral part of the scene or not. You are part of the backdrop, you're part of the setting, you're part of the atmosphere of the piece throughout. So you don't really get a chance to relax during it, which means that you are always concentrating and always focused. So rehearsals were always fun. There was always something new to learn and new to do. But it was also immensely draining as a performance, because you never get to switch off. You never get to sit backstage and, you know, wait for 20 minutes until you appear again. You're just there all the time.
Or even just little moments where Garbo and Gerda sort of meld into the scene, but they're still themselves, and moments where sometimes the characters in the ensemble notice that we're not meant to be there. I think there's just so much detail going on in every scene of TARO, not just little things that me and Lucy did, but things that people in the ensemble were doing, and I think it's quite filmic in that way. So it's great that we're going to be releasing the filmed version, because I think that those little moments are going to get their chance to shine.
As I've not done as many Arrows and Trap shows as some of the other guys, it was an immensely supportive and sort of nurturing atmosphere, really, to try stuff, to experiment, but also to know that whatever you did would be incredibly well supported by the other people around you. So for me, it was a real ensemble in the truest sense of the word, that everybody was pulling towards something great. And even if you were ostensibly what you might think would be traditionally a lead character or have a large role, it didn't feel like anybody was particularly more important than anybody else within that framework. It felt like everybody had a significant role to undertake within that story and within telling it.
So as we work together as a company on these stylized movement pieces, we develop greater trust and understanding of each other's skills and uniqueness, and a kind of physical language or box of tricks emerges.
TARO was the first time I'd worked with Arrows and Traps, and I'd known their work for a while. One of the brilliant things about going in as a creative is that a lot of the company knew one another, and also TARO was running in rep with their production of Gentleman Jack. So the company had already been working together for a few weeks. So they knew each other's processes really well. Also, a lot of the training of some of the core key members of the team is in physical theatre and movement.
Matthew brings a huge lexicon of choreography and stagecraft, which gets things on their feet really quickly. And I think that's important in the early stages of rehearsal because it gives a momentum to the process and it makes it feel less daunting. It provides us with a lot of laughs as well, and it means that you very quickly get a framework that you can later add to and refine and focus.
Working on the movement would be talking to Ross, the writer and director, about what the story was, what were the key moments that we needed to communicate through the piece, how long the piece needed to be, and often we had the music. Ross is really keen on working as much music and sound into the production as we can, so we'd have a set piece of music, a set time, a certain amount of key story points that we had to hit, and then we'd talk as a group, come up with physical ideas.
And I think it's important that everyone's able to contribute, and that up to a point, anything goes, because you never know. So long as there's this sort of 3D view from the outside that's shepherding any mad stray sheep.
Sometimes we go, right, well, we want quite a lot of lifts in this, or we want it to feel this certain way, or feel that we want it to feel heart racy, or we want it to feel violent. So we'd think about how we could establish that very quickly, and then we'd piece it together. I think I spent about 4 days in total coming up with all of the movement pieces, but I didn't set anything in advance. I did everything in the room with the team, and we worked collaboratively like that. I then dropped into a few rehearsals after that just to tweak or move or change things as required.
What I really enjoyed about the staging of it was mostly the mime. It was really, really fun, and I don't think any of us had really done much of it before. Will Pynchon had come in and done quite a bit of work with us on it. And once we had the basic mechanics of it, which took a long time, we discovered there was so much room to play with everything within that.
And Will is a magician of mime and mimicry, and with TARO we had no set as such, just a table and a couple of benches, and so Will helped us to physicalise and define the spaces and environments within the play. And he's also great on the detail within the sequences. You might think to yourself, oh, I'm really feeling this swimming bit, and he'll say, yes, but I'm getting drowning. Harsh but fair.
What I didn't necessarily anticipate so much was how much audiences were going to invest in that. I think there was a parrot, a mimed parrot in the show called Captain Flint, and something very bad happened to Captain Flint, and sometimes audience members were in tears at that, which I just thought was the most incredible thing.
So much of TARO was done through movement and through the bodies in space. All the props were mimed, and the way that the story was told was very visual and physical with the bodies in the space. So it was really important at all times with the movement work to make sure that we were incredibly clear with what was required and what we were expecting the audience to take from the story. It's about thinking of the story and the atmosphere you want to create and making sure that both of those things are pulling together. There was the added complexity of the piece being in 3 sides, so we needed to make sure that everything that we did read from all 3 sides of the auditorium, which in itself brings its own challenge. One of the things that was brilliant that we had is that we had furniture on casters on wheels, so it meant that we could sometimes imagine we were on a revolving stage and move things around.
So I've got my Masters in Physical Theatre, like I've been doing it for years. I really enjoy it, so it was just a great pleasure to be able to work with people like Matthew and Will, and to really just like get into kind of both choreograph things but also just intuition and working as an ensemble and sort of figuring different things out. Coping with that table on wheels might not have been my favourite part, but it was definitely a learning experience, you know, with all the shifting. But yeah, no, just a lot, the pleasure of being able to work very physically, which I hadn't done in a little while. I've been doing a lot of straight plays sort of before that, so it was really nice to really get into that again. I also very much enjoyed working on the 5-minute swing dance sequence that we did, that didn't actually make it into the final sort of cut of the play, with really good reason, but I found that really fun as well. So yeah.
I still get excited about the first day of rehearsal. It's like Christmas morning. Everything's so potential. Nothing is yet. It's still everything. And the table read can be an odd thing. You've presumably seen the script or perhaps an early draft, but it's the first time that you heard it voiced, given colour, and of course all the stage directions are read out, which often seem absurd and impossible to achieve. And there's sometimes perhaps an understandable reticence to the reading. Actors never like to reveal their hand too soon. And I remember that as well as the role of Heinrich, I was going to play this extraordinarily drunk Parisian gentleman who accosts Ruth, one of Goethe's friends, one night in a bar. And it was just a couple of lines written in French. But I thought for the reading I would give it the full cliched beret and strings of onions treatment. And so we came to it, and I slapped the table and fell off my chair and bellowed the lines into Laure's ear, which pepped things up a bit. And that was pretty much how I played it every night. I don't think I changed it one bit. You know, subtle like.
Arrows and Traps over the last 6 years have been building a body of work that has pretty much been constant since 2014. We stage between 3 or 4 shows a year, and even if they're not running continuously, then they are in some sort of stage of pre-production or post. So it's a very odd experience to now be stalled in your journey, particularly as we were in the midst of 2 UK tours and had received Arts Council funding for the first time. It's immensely heartbreaking to then be told you have to go and binge watch Gogglebox or a show of your taste. Thank you to everyone who's donated so far to our campaign. We're so close to our goal. The amount of support that we've received from our fans, friends, family, audience members has been fantastic, and we're honoured and humbled that you've taken the time and energy to make a donation. So thank you so much.
And it's probably one of the most rewarding and satisfying things that I think I've done, especially as an ensemble, but also just as a piece of theatre.
There's so much to admire and learn from and live up to in Taro's life, and it really was a pleasure to be a part of telling her story.
So I hope that's covered a couple of the questions that have been asked of us, and I hope you enjoy watching the show.
So that's it. That's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and please do check out the film performance of Taro if this has been in any way interesting. You can see the whole thing for free on YouTube. Just click the link below. Thank you.